Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. This is going to be an updated video of all of the current problems with the VB WRX. That's the 2022, the 2023, and soon to be the 2024 Subaru WRX. I'm going to go over everything that is a common problem that many people are reporting, things that I've experienced, things that the community experienced, basically everything you need to know about current problems. And we're not going to talk about necessarily the ones that have been addressed, but we're going to talk about problems that you could face, you might be facing, and if you're potentially buying one of these, again, that you could face. Okay, so let's say you own a WRX, you haven't experienced the problems, you have one, you're experiencing problems, or you're thinking about a WRX. There are some things that you could run into with this platform that are going to be functional problems from the factory that, you know, some don't have a fix yet. We're waiting for Subaru to address them, and some do. And we're gonna kind of go through the list. So number one, I think this is the most widespread problem that people are having, is that on the premium and on the limited models, they're having issues with the infotainment screen, the home screen, the head unit essentially. It's not really a head unit anymore, it's more of an infotainment screen. But people are experiencing problems with the screen basically blacking out or not functioning during operation of the vehicle, in which they have to actually stop the vehicle, turn it off, and turn it back on, and sometimes repeat that process a couple times, get a few key turns for it to actually come back and work. This is also paired with issues with Bluetooth connectivity, Apple CarPlay, and just basically being locked out of the infotainment screen. I haven't actually heard this a lot happening with the base WRX. In fact, I haven't really heard the base WRX having any issues with this. Let me know in the comments below if you are having, so everybody can take a look at that. But I certainly haven't any problems, and I really haven't heard a lot of people with the base WRX having the issues, but it certainly is a problem with the premium and limited models, and Subaru doesn't yet have a fix. They've had a few, let's say, TSBs, technical service bulletins, where they've done recall work, you know, software updates, all that stuff, but people that had the software update ended up having the problem recur in the future. And some people are theorizing that like Subaru is giving some type of update when you go in and get your oil change and stuff, but typically that doesn't actually happen. They do it through a recall. So it's something that I'm keeping my eye out, but it's something that you could potentially face, and there's not a fix at this point. Another thing is the gas tank door, you know, the push to open door, seizing on people, and not just in the winter, not when there's ice. So people have reported, actually fairly commonly, that has seized at times and they have to force it open. I've also heard that it's seized at times, and after a little bit of time it unseizes, which might mean that there's something happening in the background. But the people that are having the issue, it's not something that's repeatable. It happens once, it happens twice, and then it never happens again or something like that. This isn't as much of a widespread problem, but it is something that people have been reporting. There isn't currently a fix. If this happens to you, you can force it open, but you might damage your paint. So it's just something that if it happens, you got to deal with it when the time comes. Something that's a little bit more common than that with the fuel tank actually is also having issues filling your tank to full. I've actually experienced this myself quite often, and it's quite repeatable, and I'm not sure what to do about it yet. But the problem essentially is that the tank and the pressure value that your nozzle's getting when you put the nozzle for gasoline and do like an automatic fill or whatever it does, it's triggering the stop mechanism before the tank's full. I couldn't tell you actually why and why the mechanics. I'm assuming it's pressure. I'm assuming that there's something happening there where it's indicating through the internal system of the car, you know, mechanically, that there is a cutoff, right? And the gas provider and the hose itself is recognizing that cutoff and it's stopping you. But what ends up happening is you can never get to full. It always starts cutting the gas, and you have to keep pushing it, keep pushing, cut. And sometimes with certain pumps, you just can't fill your tank all the way, unless you force it, obviously. This is something that I've experienced actually pretty often. I'd say about 20% of the times I fill up over varying gas stations, it happens to me. I have found some gas stations that repeatedly it doesn't happen, or it's never happened with, and I return to those gas stations as much as I possibly can. But my guess is something is different at that specific gas station at the pump, because at the rest of the pumps, it's pretty much widespread that 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 4 times at other pumps, I'm gonna have the problem. It's not the end of the world. There's not currently a fix, but I am not certainly alone in happening. I actually made a video on this, and the amount of the community that reached out to me basically saying, I'm also having that problem, was actually pretty insane. I got over 300 emails also stating that, which isn't, in the grand scheme of things, just thinking about one of my videos, isn't a small number of people. For a stock WRX, that's basically all of the problems people are facing. There aren't a lot of repeatable problems other than those two that people are, let's say, running into. Most of the issues with stopping and starting or getting the engine to turn over that we were experiencing in the early 2022 models seems to have basically fizzled out. I don't know if it was like engines getting more time on them, that those people got something addressed by Subaru, but we just haven't been hearing about that issue as much. With that said, there are a few things popping up with tuned vehicles that we can talk about. So the number one on our list is actually check engine lights. So if you're planning on tuning this car or installing modifications that may require a tune, we're talking specifically intakes where intake manufacturers say no tune required. I'll come out with a separate video on that, but basically every intake that you put on this car, minus maybe one, really needs a tune. But with check engine lights with this car, what we've actually found, this car is a little bit more eager to throw a check engine light or an engine code if you change something. So what people are seeing is that things that may not have been triggered on the VA WRX or STI actually trigger a check engine light on this. Even though it's a very similar part, it doesn't really affect the engine. It's just a little bit more, I guess the line of safety is a little bit lower or a little bit higher, so it just wants to throw the code just in case. That's something that you might run into. I'm seeing it with intakes, certain exhausts, people that have just like disassembled their system and then reassembled it. It's triggering something that the engine's recognizing that there was maybe a loss in pressure, that you've then put it back up together. Whatever it is throwing a code. We've also started to see evidence of high torque builds and high horsepower builds slipping with their clutch. It's not super repeatable, not that many people have gotten there, but it's also should be noted that there are people running upwards of 4 or 5, and there even is a 600 horsepower VB WRX out there with an aftermarket clutch and flywheel that seems to be doing okay on the stock transmission, which is a massive move. The amount of 400 plus horsepower, under 500 horsepower, wheel horsepower, let's say, VB WRX is out in the market with not having issues with the transmission is actually kind of remarkable, because that's getting close to the same levels as the STI transmission. Fight me in the comment section. The STI's transmission is just better overall transmission. About 50% of that, you know, when you take away the driving experience of the transmission, comes with the ability of the transmission to hold power, which if this is anecdotally, at this point, there's not enough numbers to prove all this stuff. If this is anecdotally showing that it can handle the same amount of power, that's big news for us. That means these cars can do a lot. And the last actually fairly large problem that we are seeing, and I'm gonna make an entirely separate video on this because I think it's actually really important, but I'll give you a brief overview right now. The last problem with these cars when you're getting into the modification realm is actually the response from Subaru. And it's a little bit worrying or worrisome in my opinion, is that dealers are getting a little bit more stringent about their interaction with modded WRXs. Not that they won't work on them, but the commentary that we're seeing from them, their opinions on certain parts, what they will and won't do, and how strict Subaru is kind of being over warrantied work. We still don't have enough volume of cars that have been modded dealing with problems with Subaru to have a firm line on it. But we're seeing issues and instances where people would have gotten warrantied work from dealers or gotten service from a dealer with a VA WRX, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, and they're not touching these cars with the same modifications or whatever the situation is. I don't know if that's an EPA strictness or the dealer doesn't want to even like get around that. I don't know yet, but I just want to say it out loud that there are some, we're seeing some issues. I've actually had a few local VB WRXs that have a little bit more extensive exhaust systems with me that are still okay, and a few tuned VB WRXs that have been actually refused service at large dealers in the Northeast just because they're modified, which is a little bit crazy to me. And I know that there's a lot of Subaru techs that follow this channel. I'd love to know in the comment section below if you're one of those dealers. If you have the reasoning, if you can tell us, let me know in the comment section below. If you've also been refused service, I'd be super interested to know as well. But that's the last on our list right now as of mid-2023. Actually, it's almost late 2023 now. It's the summer. It's the end of the summer, actually, which is kind of crazy. But that is the current update on all the problems that you could face, both stock and tuned. And yeah, that's basically the video.